Hey YouTube, hey guys, and today as the title suggests, I'm going to talk about the Freelap timing system. I'm going to go through the system first, how I set it up and use it, and then I'm going to go through how I use it to improve, to first see errors in my sprint and how I use it to correct it. So, there's a lot of information out there and a lot of online coaches, and a lot of times you have trouble trying to figure out how to apply this. What should I do first? So I'm going to show you how this Freelap system kind of guided my training, my path, and what advice to follow. And again, I am a recreational sprinter. I'm doing this as a health pursuit for longevity. I'm not a competitive sprinter. I never have been. So I will preface this by saying, for the purpose of sprinting, unlike weightlifting or running marathons or 3Ks or 5Ks, there's very few people who sprint. And there's a lot of data and information about what your speed and time should be for high school athletes, college athletes, and competitive track athletes who are trying to be Olympians. And there are a lot of times from masters, which are actually professional races. And these are people who were football players or track athletes in a former life and never got out of shape. They just they want to stay active. So there's a lot of unrealistic times for athletes, but there isn't a lot of comparative performance data for recreational sprinters, especially someone like me who's approaching 50, who was never a competitive athlete, and I am picking up sprinting. So really your performance goals, your comparator is going to be yourself, your before and after. So this is why this video is here, but I just want to say that in case you're thinking of sprinting, it's tough to not be discouraged when you look at the times of the pro. It's good to have something to aim to, but there's nothing that you can compare to, especially when sprinting, there's no weight classes, it's open. So for your weight, your body fat level, your level of power, your levers, there's really no comparison. You just try to do better than you did the last time, The important thing is that you're out there sprinting and you're ahead of 90% of the people. If you're in this age group, in fact, any age group, if you're out there sprinting consistently, trying to learn how to sprint, you're probably better, you're doing more than 90% of the people, okay? So let me start with the Freelap system. So the Freelap system comes in a cool bag like this. And what it essentially is you get these little transmitters. These are the cones that perceive your time. And you get this little chip that you wear. That's how it knows that you're passing through the cone. And there's an app on your phone that you download. And when you run past this cone with this attached to you, it transmits your time to your phone, to the app. There is also a website you log in and it uploads, everything syncs, okay? So you need your cell phone as the transmitter cones and this chip, right? It's a very simple system. There's a few nuances that I'll tell you about setting it up. So first of all, these cones, if you see, they have start, lap, finish, and there's a recharging port. I actually need to charge them. So it comes with 3, and you can buy more separately, right? One cone you set up as you see it says start, lap, finish. You set up one cone as you just keep this button down and it toggles it. One cone is your start cone, one cone is your finish cone. And if you're gonna have an intermediate time, you set up 3 cones and one is your start, lap, finish, okay? One other thing, the radius of detection for this cone is around 0.8 meters for this. So that comes into play when you're setting up at the start line. So if you set up for a 40-meter dash and you set up at the 0, the 10, and then from the 10, the 40 meters, this being your, you mark this, you set this to be your finish cone, set this to be your lap cone. You will get your 0 to 10 time and your 0 to 40 time total, and it will give you a 10 meter to 40 meter split. That's cool. However, it has a 0.8 meter detection radius. So ideally from your start line, you would want to measure 0.8 meters and then put the start cone. And then at your 10 meter mark, which is where you're going to test your split time, you put this one at 10.8 meters and you put this one at 40.8 meters. The reason is because when you come up to your start line, you don't want it to trigger a start while you're setting up, breathing, get yourself ready, because that's going to be a wasted run. So if the start cone is set up at 0.8 meters and you are setting up your 3-point stand-in start at the 0 meter line, the start, it's only when you explode out that it's going to pick you up, okay? And obviously the 10 meter run will be, the cone will be at 10.8 meters and the 40 meter time trap will be at the 40.8 meter mark. So that's 10 meters accurately between. So that's a little nuance to set it up, because, and I'm trying to save you trouble, because if you don't do that, you're going to waste a lot of time and mental energy on the field setting this up. And it saps your energy to set it up if you don't know. I'm just telling you, especially when you're going out there to sprint and your adrenaline is all up. How do I calm myself down? But the only way to become proficient at it is to keep setting it up, okay? The other caveat is that the cell phone, which I'm talking to you through, so this little chip records data, and whatever is set up as your finish cone is what transmits your total time to your cell phone. So your cell phone needs to be close to the finish line. It can't just be anywhere, okay? The closer it is to the finish cone at the end, it's going to send your entire time, your lap time, speed, everything to your cell phone. So what I do is I will put the cell phone on a bench, or you can use a tripod like this and set it up by the finish line. Now, here's another thing that you wouldn't think about. You have to think of this in lanes. So if you see me right here, this is my sprint lane, just like a track. When you set up these cones in your lane, right, I set up the cell phone 5 or 6 feet apart and create a lane at the finish line. The reason is because once you run through this lane next to these cones, and you know, if these cones are arranged this way, and I'm running here right next to the cone, I'm going to trigger a time. But when I come back to check the phone, if the phone is too close to the finish cone, it's going to trigger another time. So create a running lane at the finish line. When you line up these cones, at the soccer field I run on the sidelines, I measure my distances and I set up the cone. So I run next to the sideline. About 5 or 6 feet away, I put a bench and I put the cell phone and I have the app running and I set up all the cones and the phone. So when I run, I sprint along the sideline and I finish between the cell phone on the bench and the final cone, but I walk around to the other side of the bench, far away from the finish cone, enough where it doesn't detect me, and I look at my time, and then I rest and I walk back down to the beginning. So these are just little things. I think if you don't understand it, play it back and listen to it, but it's going to save you a lot of time when you're on the field setting up. It was cumbersome at first for me, and I kind of didn't use it for a while, and I'll get to that. But the more you do it, the better you're going to be at it, and the better you're going to, once you set up your run that day, you also have to go in the app and tell it what you're doing. It doesn't automatically know it. It's kind of a dummy system. It just records when you run through it. You have to put the metrics in. So if you're doing 0 to 10 and then a cone at the 40, so you're trying to see how fast your 0 to 10 start is in your 40 meter run, you have to go and set up that you're doing a sprint and your distances from your first cone is 10 meters and the second cone is 30 meters, total 40 meters. This is a key thing. So, and it asks you to put the lap time. So the middle cone is a lap cone. If you buy more cones for more intermediate times, they're just lap 1, lap 2. So the very first distance you enter will be 10 meters, and the system knows that's from your what you designate as a start cone to your first lap cone. When you add the second distance, which for this 40-meter run would be another 30 meters, it knows from the lap to the finish is 30 meters. Then you start the run and it goes into recording mode, and you hit the play button and you just leave the phone there, and it's now just waiting for data. Okay. Once you set it, you have to give it a distance so it gives you speed. So make sure you put a descriptor. Once you start a workout that day, it gives you the option to replace the data, put as much description as you can, because when you go back to look at it, it's going to help you verify that you set it up right, but to know what you're looking at that day. So if it's like 40-meter dash, put 40-meter dash with 0 to 10 split. Don't just think you're going to look at the exercise setup and the distance and understand, because you won't be able to tell the difference between that and a flying 10. But if you put the distance, you can select for it to show speed, and the display will show you your split time, total time, and your speed and your average time. Okay? Make sure you run through your lane, walk out, check your time, and walk back in. Okay? When you set it up and you're doing your warm-ups, just casually walk or jog through and make sure the system is working, and then come up to check your time and make sure the distance at the timing station, which is your cell phone, your elevated cell phone, is far enough that it doesn't trigger you. Okay? So let me get into now part 2, which is how I started this. And then I'll talk about, at the final thing, how I use it to improve. So I bought this late last year, and I use it in January. It took a while for me to learn how to set this up, because your first time is always tough, and it's a learning curve. But, you know, I had been sprinting for about 3 years, and I really just focused on sprinting. All the sprint coaches said, forget about doing this workout and this. Like, if you're not sprinting properly, work on your form and just sprint. You need to sprint more. Spend more time on the field, less time in the gym. So eventually my fitness got up to where I was sprinting 100 meters, 120 on a curve. Wasn't fast at all, I'm sure. But my point is, I got myself metabolically to where I was doing nose breathing. I really worked on my top end mechanics, because my 0 to 40 was shit. I was not very athletic, wasn't very mobile, didn't know how to start. And I said, look, just focus on what you can focus on. You can always come back and fix stuff. But for me, the best health benefit for sprints was after 40 meters. Like, if I can keep pushing the motor to redline and hold as much as I can redline all the way from 40 to 80, 90, I said, that's where you're going to supercharge your health, right? So I focused on that a lot, and then I started to get curious. Now, you can be a hobbyist or recreationist and stay that way. But I'm the kind of guy where I have to get in deep in the weeds in a sport. So I was like, I wonder if I can get a timing software to see what I'm at. So I spent $700-800 on a Freelap, Christmas 2023, I believe. And I did my first timing in January. And I gotta tell you, I was very disappointed. Now, keep in mind, I am a recreational sprinter. So the times I'm gonna tell you are not very good. But my point is, in this part of the video, is that I fell out of favor. I put down the Freelap and I just didn't touch it after February. I was kind of disappointed at my time. I went back and I tried to improve my time, and I said, man, you should be faster than this. I didn't expect you to be this slow for all this work that you're doing. And then setting it up was a pain. you know, and I told myself it'd be better if I hire a coach to come here and do the setting up while I prepare. So I put the Freelap down. It went into the box, sat in the house. I actually put it up for sale because I was like, you're not good enough for this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, why did you get this? You're just a overweight guy trying to get his health back. You should just get out there and sprint and forget about timing and your speed. My initial plan was you should do this and try to get better. But then I told myself, you're probably not going to get better. But my coach who programs for me said, Rishi, I always believe in toys and performance things. I would not sell it. Just keep it. You never know when it's going to be handy. So I just kind of chalked it up as maybe you're not there yet. And I kind of left it, you know. So that's part two about how that's how I used it. But recently, I don't know what triggered it, but around Thanksgiving, like November, I decided, let me pull it out and just do a 0 to 10, 10, 20 split and see if I was better over January, February. And it was. So then I said, well, it got me curious. And I said, well, let's put some timing gates. Let's put these things at like the 40-meter mark, 60-meter mark. Let's see. You know, your time isn't going to be crazy, but let's just see where your top speed is. Like, what's your top speed? What do you think your top speed? Like, when I started off, I wanted to get my 0 to 40 time, and I realized that's a combination of power to weight, athletics, biomechanics. Focus on other stuff. And I said, look, speed is the total power output. If you're not accelerating fast, at the very least, if you're hitting decent top speed, your engine, your power output is good, which means your health is very good, has improved a lot. So the other thing is in February, I had my coach's brother, I put the timer on him. And now he is a former D1 soccer player, and he just did a triathlon. He is a freak of nature, just like his brother. And this kid ran like a 7-second 60. Like, he was just showing up, kicking the soccer ball while I was like sprinting, resting. He never stopped moving. And his speed was like 8 point something meters per second. And this is just like a kiss my ass run. You know what I mean? He was just running for shits and giggles. He wasn't preparing to sprint. He had soccer cleats on. And I was like, I mean, that kind of dejected me. So that kind of showed me, okay, this system works, but this is how somebody's supposed to sprint. Look at this guy. He took off. His 0 to 10 split was super good. And he just kept accelerating all the way to like 40 and 60, you know? And that's kind of how a sprinter, you know, usually should be. So I tested my time and my speed, and it wasn't all there, and it made me start thinking, well, you know, my speed I think was like 6 point something meters per second, which isn't bad for a recreational sprinter, but I expect it to be better. So I said, and I tested it at the 40, 50, and then at the 10, so I'm like, it's obvious I was losing speed. So I told myself, something is wrong, like you're not holding speed at the drive phase. So that forced me to dial into the 0, 10, and 20 phase and do a bit of work. So the key point here in the second part is that when you use the timing system, it shows you, your ego is going to get hurt. If you use it properly, it'll diagnose where your weak points are. And that'll put you on a bunny trail about, what should I improve? What's the next plan of attack? And that put me into like really using it again, because it made me dial into the start and then the 10 to 20. So the point here is that if you're going to sprint to do any sport, get yourself a performance system, because even though you may not see the benefit early, if you use it, it's going to force you to measure your gaps and then put you on a path to go seek knowledge, which is all available on YouTube and books, and how to improve these little parts, right? And you get a lot of use of it. So now I'm going to get to the third part, and I'm going to explain to you how I ended up using this now and how I got on to try to improve my sprints. Now, first, let me start by saying a professional sprinter or a competitive collegiate sprinter who's good, once they accelerate 0 to 10, they have a certain time that's acceptable by coaches as a 0 to 10 start and a 10-meter split time, high speed. But they often reach 90% of their top speed at 30-meter mark, which is insane to think about. And from the 30 to 60, they're trying to reel in that extra 2%, you know, those extra 2 miles an hour, maybe 3. So, so the start is very important, but past the 10-meter mark, they really have to keep accelerating up. And then at 60 meters, everyone has a top speed. Like, I think this is at high level and even Olympic level. About 60, 65 meters, everybody tops out, except for Usain Bolt, because the laws of sprinting don't apply to him. I guess he would keep accelerating all the way out to 70, 75 meters, which is insane. So that's like a template. Like, you should be accelerating 10, 20, 30, at least a 40 before you reach your speed. And then after that, speed endurance, right? How far can you hold that? Because you are going to start decelerating like at 80 meters. So that's a perfect sprinter. Here's what was happening to me. Now, first, let me tell you, I looked at my time at 40 and 60, and I realized that your times are slow. So I took these and I measured my 20 and 30 meter mark, and I realized that they were the same time. So I said, you're not increasing your speed. So something is, I just kept thinking, you don't have enough power. Maybe you need to do weights, do sled more. And I said, my coach said, I don't think it's that you're strong enough. I think it's technique. So now it forced me to read about the 0, 10, 20, 30 meter part of sprinting. So right away, having this Freelap system forced me not just to see my errors, but in all the mass of information out there in sprinting, now it's pointed me to pay attention to this first. So I paid attention to my 0 to 10 at my start, and that's the hardest part. I had my stance, because I'm doing a standing start, whether my feet are should be this way. How wide am I going to step out? Am I going to do short, quick steps, or am I going to do longer bounds, or am I going to do in between? Now, I will tell you, in January, my 0 to 10 start times were 2.5. I actually got that down to 1.9 seconds. So I usually run now between 2.0, 2.1 or 2 on the start, and 1.9 on the first 10 meters. On a bad day, if I'm tired, I'll do 2.1, 2.2. If I tighten it up, there's some days I just do 1.9, 1.95, 1.96, right? So consistency is a little bit of a problem. I sprint twice a week and I work out, so there's some days the legs are sore. But I was very happy, because if you were to Google it, 1.9 meters per second, 1.9 seconds in the 0 to 10 is a very good time, right? So that also meant that at the 10 meter mark, my speed was like 5 point something meters per second. So right away, I brought that up, right? So now I'm like, so I tested the 40, 50, still wasn't that good. And I said, all right, now let's look at 10 to 20 and 20 to 30. So that's the path that I'm on now. So my point is, having the Freelap system, once I got through my testing and saw how slow I was, I came back to it, and it kind of showed me where I was slow. So now I'm actually deconstructing the sprint 0 to 10, making sure I get that nailed. And when I'm consistent, I move the timers out 10, 20, 30. And I need to see progression, right? As it is, what I learned was that by the 30 meter mark, I'm at 6.4.5 meters per second. When I get to the 50 and 60 meter mark, it drops down at the 50 meter mark to 5.9, 5.8, and at the 60 meter mark, 5.3, 5.4 meters per second. So whereas a top competitive sprinter has their acceleration constantly has their speed increase. It's a big bump 10 to 30, and then 30 to 60 meters, they're still going up. I come out 10, 20, 30, kind of flatline, decrease a little, and hold it. So what's the problem? I'm not too sure. Those of you who are sprinters could probably chime in. I do need help. I'll tell you, I'm not too sure, but the best working hypothesis I could come up with is that after the 20, I'm coming up too early. My shin angles are getting very close to the right angles, and whatever top speed I make at 20 to 30, I'm just stopping it right there, and I'm kind of moving into a speed endurance phase. And you know, the sprint coaches always say, if you pop up too early, you kill your top speed, and you're in a higher gear asking for acceleration. Eventually, your body's going to start backing off the speed because you didn't really maximize that horizontal push. So really, now that I know that, I told myself, well, you should still run all the way to 60, 80, but you need to put cones at 20, 30, 40, and you need to just keep measuring that and working on putting horizontal force in. And as you transition, don't transition too abruptly. It needs to be gentle because you got to keep that acceleration, you know? Even if the acceleration is minimal, if I hit 6 meters per second and I end up at the 40, 50 mark at 6.2 or 3, or even 6.1, I consider that a win because I'm not bleeding out speed, you know? So that also made me think not just about the start, but go and read about and listen to different coaches about how they coach and how their approaches are to the start. And it made me throw in like sled runs more. Now, I don't put weight on the sled, but I set up on the sled as I do my start, and I just make myself comfortable with like really digging, but keeping that back angle that I want at 10 to 20 meters. Now, I think at my gym, the sled thing is about 20 meters. So I'll do sled runs more, and right after I'll just do some starts, you know? And, you know, I told myself, I started playing with my foot position, my ground contact, but I had to make sure that that big toe and ball of the toe gets it, and I have a good foot heel angle. So during the sled runs, I practice that, and it gives me the mental proprioception to know this is what it feels like when your angle is forward, your weight's a little forward, and you can really dig in with your toe. Because once I get that big toe and big ball of the ball of my big toe in, I feel I have more powerful steps. Toeing out my feet feels more secure, but it puts a little bit more strain on my calves, and I don't think it's faster. I found that when I bring my feet in almost to where I'm knock-kneed, I feel powerful and confident. So I'm back to that now. So that's where I am, and that's what I have to work on for next year is now that I've identified my weak spot, I have to focus on that, the drive phase. So my weak spot is the drive phase. So in summation, what did this help me do? Well, first of all, the very first thing at the beginning here, it showed me that data can really crack your ego and get you disappointed. So it taught me to be disappointed and get away from being disappointed and actually get off your mental ass and use it to teach you. And it's forced me to dissect my sprint, to break apart the sprint and break it down into blocks from the beginning. So instead of this thing I had where I just measured 40, 60 and look at the big picture, keep in mind I'm not a coach, I use these to start baby steps. Start from the crawl. Get your 0 to 10. Get your body position where you know you can consistently get 1.9, 0 to 10. So you don't have to time it anymore. Then time 20 10, 20, 30. Once that's done, if all of this works and you get great trap times and good speed, 10, 20, 30, that's automatically going to decrease your 40 and 60 meter time. Then I'll probably do some runs at 40, 60. I'll probably just to see where I'm at. But then the next big run is the 40, 30, 40 to 60 run. So I'm just going to break this down into sections, and that will help me stay true, you know. At least if I fall back in a section, it will show me and I will know you're slacking, you're forgetting stuff. And I will develop hopefully a best practice and ingrain it in my head that when you start up with the sprint, this is your position, this is what you focus on the first 10 meters to keep that horizontal force, and this is what you do at 40. You know, once you have good times, you're going to remember what you did that time ideally. I will say my next purchase is probably going to be more of these, because if I buy enough of these, I'll be able to do time and speed at every 10 meter increment or even 20 meter increments. And I feel having a run where I have like a full 60 meters broken up with maybe 4 of these, I'll have a lot more data, because seeing your velocity at increments of 10 meters is really going to show you where your speed, where your acceleration is good and tanking, What I suspect is after 60, once I become comfortable in the top end phase, I feel my speed climbs back up. There's a few runs I did where at 50, my speed was lower than 60, meaning I've hit 6 point something at 30, 40 meters. I dropped to 5.5 at the 50 meter mark, but I picked back up to 5.9 at the 60 meter mark. So, and at the high speed phase, I do, as Noah Lyle said, just diagnose yourself and change one thing at a time. Try to focus on ground contact, short ground contact, power straight down. So I am very curious to test the top time. But to wrap up, I highly recommend Freelap if you want to start improving your sprint. Like, if you don't measure, you won't know where you are. And you know, if you're going to measure one, somebody with a stopwatch could do it. But if you really want to dig into where I'm bad and where it needs improvement, I do recommend this, especially if you're out there by yourself. This gives you data that's stored. You can send it to coaches, send it to online coaches, and just have it to look back on. Having data is a good thing. So it's also, you know, if you're sprinting, the better you can be at it, the better the response and adaptation to the human body. And it gives you something to do. You know, if you know, at this age, it's nice to have constructive pursuits to do. You know, I mean, we're not hanging out partying like we used to be. So, yeah, this is my experience with Freelap software. They do have good support. I think right here in Florida, in Alachua, is where the distributor is. And I shot the guy an email. He shot me one right back. They'll tell you how to set it up. In fact, you can just contact them. They have different packages, but for what you want, you can just ask them and they'll tell you. And you can just call them if you kind of don't know how to set up something. So it's an investment, but you know, a lot of times when you buy an investment like this, you know you have to use it because you spent the money for it. So I think now after a year, it's definitely starting to pay back its dividends, because a lot of this technology that you buy, your approach to it is relative to your maturity in that field. So at the beginning of the year, I was just looking at speed and time, and I was like, whatever, I'm just sprinting. But it forced, having it here, knowing I spent the money, forced me to evolve and start being a coach to myself. And now I'm doing a very quantitative, strategic approach to trying to improve my sprint. And now I'm in the drive phase, where I'm trying to focus on why am I losing acceleration in the drive phase. My assumption is your mechanics and your body position are wrong. You don't need to go do a lot of weight training and stuff. Let's just figure out how to efficiently use the power that you have. before we go try and change anything. So that's my approach. If I'm wrong or you think that there's more I should do, please comment. But if you're doing any kind of track work or you have kids who are doing it, you're doing it with them, I would say buy it, because when you're out there training without your coach, or your kids are out there, you'll have time to bring to your coach, and you can do homework on your own. Plus, it's fun. It's like a competition when I'm out there. Every time, when the cones aren't set up, I'm a bit mentally laissez-faire, which could be a good thing, because when you're relaxed, you sometimes put down the best sprints. But knowing the timer is there makes me try harder, and if I over-try and it sucks, when I'm resting for a few minutes, I think to myself and I try something else. And if it works, I make a note that, ooh, this worked, Now, I will say for sprints, you do 4 or 5 runs. Your first or your second run might be your best run. And 3, 4, and 5, you're probably going to bleed off. And that's just human nature. So, all right, that's my talk. Peace.